Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Port Cities panel discussion. I'm Mary Serby with TeamNEO, stepping in for Christine Nelson today. We're very excited to have you all join us today. I would like to first of all thank our sponsors, Platform Brewery, Downtown Cleveland Alliance, Supply Side Group, Ulmer & Byrne, Rotary Club of Cleveland, Growth Ops, Eaton, Taiwan Sister Cities, CIP USA, Margaret Wong and Associates, TeamNEO, Peace Corps, and 12 Literary Arts. We've got a great panel discussion here for you today. I'd like to briefly introduce our panelists and let them then give you some insight into their current role. Our first panelist is Media Duke. Media Duke graduated in traffic technology and transport logistics and obtained a postgraduate degree title of Specialist of Science in Traffic Technology and Transport Logistics. After 8 years working in forwarding agency Interropa Koper, he joined Luca Koper DD in 1995. During this years, he was on different leading and managerial positions, among them Director of General Cargo Terminal in Italy, Director of Reefer Terminal in Koper, Market Manager of Port Koper for Hungary and Germany. And since his return from Germany in 2011, he was Sales Manager in Sales and Marketing Department on CAR and RORO Terminal. In July 2018, he was appointed a Sales and Marketing Director. Thank you for joining us. Our next panelist is Will Friedman. Will Friedman is the President and CEO of the Port of Cleveland and has been since 2010. He has also been Chairman of the American Association of Ports and held positions for the Port of Indiana and the Port of Seattle. Thank you, Mr. Friedman, for joining us. Our third panelist is Mayor Grubliauskas of Lithuania. Since 2011, Mayor Grubliauskas was born in Klaipeda. He was also served as a member of Klaipeda City Council and of the Lithuanian Parliament. He is also an acclaimed trumpist and former music professor. Welcome, thank you for joining us. Our next panelist is Kim Kirkendall. Kim has been a bridge between US and China for over 30 years. She began her career in China, moving there in 1986 after graduating from The Ohio State University. Now back in the US, her company, International Resource Development, Inc., improves operations and communication for clients with businesses both in the US and China. Thank you, Kim, for joining us. And finally, our panelist, John Cenice. John has 37 years of experience working for major multinational companies in the chemical, plastics, and automotive aftermarket industries. With 31 years directly focused on international business, he recently started his own international consulting practice, providing assistance to Northeast Ohio companies with topics related to international trade, import and export regulatory compliance, and the U.S. Foreign Trade Zone program. Thank you, John, for joining us. So I'd like to give each of our panelists a few minutes to talk to you about their roles and their experience, and I will start with Mr. Duke. Oh, you're muted.
Yes, you can hear me now, I believe. Yeah. Hello, good morning to everybody. Actually, good afternoon from Europe, from Slovenia, from Koper. Yeah, here it's nearly 6 o'clock in the afternoon, so good afternoon once again. Really, thank you very much for inviting us as well. We are really pleased to join such an important event as a Global Cleveland Sister Cities. And I'm really happy that I have the opportunity to introduce Port of Koper. Actually, Port of Koper is the most Adriatic cargo port and also the only Slovenian cargo port. Slovenia, as you know, it's a relatively small country with 2 million inhabitants only. And of course, Koper port is the only cargo port in Slovenia. But as I mentioned, the most northern Adriatic port, because of this, the shortest sea final destination, especially from Far East markets, Asian markets to Europe. Because of this, all East European and Central European countries are the most important countries for us, markets for us. And on the other side, of course, overseas markets beginning with Asia, all Asian and Far East markets. Unfortunately, USA, it's not one of the most important markets for us because North European ports like Hamburg, Rotterdam, and the other ports, especially German ports, are having better sea connections with US ports. So as I mentioned, not the most important market, but still we are having different connection with different US ports, like for example, New York, Baltimore, Savannah as well. We are having some container exchange, a few thousand containers yearly, but as I mentioned, not on the first positions. Otherwise, Port of Koper, it's 280 hectares big. We are in this year in a very big enlargement process. So these 280 hectares will be very soon 340. Concerning facility and terminals, we are also developing. Just now we are opening a new garage house for vehicles, for cars. We just opened Roro terminal and Roro pier. We are prolonging and enlarging pier, so-called pier number 1. This is container terminal, and so on and so on. So we believe that during the crisis times, and this year 2020, it's definitely a crisis year. In crisis time, it's necessary to invest, to develop for the future better times. Otherwise, what is still important by our port is that we are a universal port or a multi-purpose port. It means that we are providing services for all kinds of cargo. So we are not focused only on containers or cars, but we are really doing and offering everything. Because of this, we are divided on 12 different specialized terminals. One of them is, for example, container terminal, the other one car terminal, the third one perishable terminal for fruits and vegetables, then coal, iron-on, project cargo, break bulk cargo, even livestock, so live animals, then a terminal for alumina and other minerals, terminal for timber, terminal for liquid bulk, so all kinds of liquid bulk cargo, and then still all kinds of cereals, so wheat, maize, corn, and other cereals, so dry bulk cargo terminal. And the 12th terminal, the last one, it's terminal for passengers, so cruise terminal. Unfortunately, exactly this terminal, passenger terminal, cruise terminal, suffered, let's say, the biggest consequences this year because of the COVID. We are having in our passenger terminal a lot of ship owners, so cruise ship owners from USA, coming regularly to the port of Koper, but as I mentioned, not this year. I believe we will have still chance to speak a little later concerning COVID and influences because of COVID. So I will stop now with this small introduction. Let me say once again, East European, Central European countries are the most important markets for us. From Koper, all these markets are reachable in 24 hours by trucks, by highway, and 48 hours by railway, by wagons. So we are doing relatively well. We are one of the most important Slovenian companies, public share companies. Our shares are quoting in Ljubljana Stock Exchange. Last few years, especially last 2 years, were really booming and were record years for us. But this year it's quite a different position. Actually, approximately 10 up to 15%, we decrease our turnover, our volumes within container cars and also general turnover. It's very funny because when we make plans on the very beginning of this year concerning our, let's say, visits and business trips, we were really very ambitious and active on the very beginning of this year. Honestly speaking, I didn't know how we will do all this traveling this year. And then on the final stage showed up that we didn't travel this year at all. I believe this is a similar situation also with the other business companies and ports. So yeah, this is the fact this year. Thanks again, and I'm sure we will have still opportunity to speak something later concerning the topic of today. This is, I believe, COVID.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Mr. Friedman.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. It's great to be with all of you. Can everyone hear me okay? First of all, a little bit of a sound check. I know there was a bit of a echo for some reason off of my machine earlier, so I hope that's not
I think you're good.
disturbing. Good. Well, again, greetings from Cleveland to everybody from around the world, in Europe or wherever you may be. It's great to be with you. I'm excited to talk ports a little bit today with some of my colleagues in the industry and others who are experts in their own fields, and of course the mayor as well. So greetings from my board at the Port of Cleveland, also known as the Cleveland-Cuyahoga County Port Authority, formally, which is a long name that we don't use very much. It's a lot easier to say Port of Cleveland. Port of Cleveland and Cleveland, of course, is a port city. I think we suffered a little bit from a lack of recognition, full recognition around the world, and even here in the United States, that we are a port city and we are important to the economy of this region and the economy in Ohio, which I'll dive into a little more deeply as we come back to some of the questions. Just a couple of more words on me and my background, and then a little bit more on our port by way of introduction. I've kind of had a long and winding road in my career to get where I am now here in Cleveland. I started out in the neighboring state of Indiana. I grew up in Indianapolis, Indiana. I went to school there, ended up with a master's degree in public administration with a specialty in urban planning, and then sort of fell by accident into the port industry, into port authorities, which I've done now for more than 30 years. It's been a wonderful career. Those of you who are fortunate enough to work in the port world and in the maritime world know that it's very interesting place to work and a lot of fun, and get to meet wonderful people around the world. I went to work for the ports of Indiana back in the late 1980s. It's a statewide port system, which differs from the way ports are set up here in Ohio. And I worked a couple of years, then was fortunate to be hired by the Port of Seattle, and was in Seattle at the port all through the 1990s decade. Came back to Indiana in 2000 and took over as the CEO of the Ports of Indiana system. And then I went to work for a large real estate investment trust, a developer of primarily distribution of buildings, Duke Realty Corporation based in Indianapolis. And I was there 5 years and got to learn a lot about that side of the supply chain and logistics space. And then in 2010, was hired here to be the CEO in Cleveland, and have been working since then to make our port more relevant. We're a niche port. We're a smaller port than the two ports represented on our panel this morning, or this afternoon, I should say, depending on where you are. But nonetheless, we're also quite diversified, as Micho was saying about his port. We can handle many different types of cargo, which I'll get into a little bit. Historically, we've been very tightly integrated with a couple of supply chains in particular, mostly related to steel, either finished steel coming in from Europe, or raw steel making, which takes place here in Cleveland at our integrated mill. So I'll leave it at that, and look forward to having more of a conversation with the panelists in a few minutes.
Thank you so much, Will. Okay, and now I'm echoing, sorry. Is that better? Okay, sorry. Mayor Grubliauskas, can you please introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your port?
Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
No, we can't hear you.
Okay, thank you so much. It's
Yes.
a bit troubles with sound, but probably you will understand me, and I will tell what I would like to say. So thank you so much for the possibility to join this amazing company. Good morning, America. Yes, as it was mentioned, it's like a evening time in Lithuania, but anyway, it's always meeting with the friends, meeting with the colleagues. Every time is very good. It's not dependent, it's the morning or it's the night. So for me, it's a great honor to say hello from Lithuania, from Klaipeda. And if to speak about the port of Klaipeda, it's a port only in Lithuania. and so it's no competition in Lithuania, so it's as a single port. But if you speak about the competition in the Baltics, the Klaipeda port is most competitive port between among the ports of Poland, Germany, Latvia, and Russia, of course. Klaipeda is one of the leaders in the Baltic Sea, among the Baltic Sea ports, and if you speak about the capacity per year, it's approximately more like 40 million tons per year. And the biggest part of this cargo is, of course, fertilizers. By the way, it's the oil, it's containers, and other cargo. But anyway, it's as well, it's very diversified cargo, and is one of the strengths for the port of Klaipeda. By the way, we have a cruise ship terminal, we have cruise liners in our port. Unfortunately, this year we lost all of them. We had plans in the beginning of the year to have approximately 62 cruise ship visits to Klaipeda. Unfortunately, all of them were canceled. So we lost approximately 70,000 of tourists. It's quite big capacity for us, but anyway, we hope next year it will be recovered, and all the tourists and all the cruise ships will come back to Klaipeda as well. And what is very important as well to say, during this COVID and pandemic time, Klaipeda port was only gates to and out from Lithuania. So it was a great challenge for the city and of course for the state. But now we can say we managed this challenge, we faced the challenge and managed it, and in the best way. And particularly we can see it now when the second wave of COVID is coming to Lithuania. And if you compare with the first wave on the first time, and it was in February, March, and a bit of April, now Klaipeda has absolutely like just 1-2 cases per day, no more. When in Lithuania we have 170 like for today. So now we are in a very good position, and of course the experience we got in the beginning of this, it helps for us very much. And of course, as I mentioned, to be as a port city, it was special challenges, but mostly we managed them ourselves. Sometimes, maybe not sometimes, but not too much, but with the help and support from the government. But we survived, as you see, and now we have a quite good situation for now, for today. Port, it's a strong factor for the economy in Lithuania, and if you compare about importance of the city and port for the state economy, Klaipeda is the third city in Lithuania. But if you speak about influence for the state economy and strategical importance for the state, it's the second city, no doubt, because it's a bigger support for the state from the Klaipeda. But as I mentioned, maybe a couple of days before, port in Klaipeda is a state government, state management, state authorities, and city has no direct influence in the management of the port. But anyway, we have good collaboration with the port, and mostly we look in the same direction and looking for the common solutions every time, and in every case we meet in our common life. So probably it's very quickly. I don't like to speak about me so much because you told about me a little bit. Probably I will not. You will not ask me to play today, but if you would like, I think it's possible. But I think we have much more interesting discussions, and we'll share our experience a bit later. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mayor. Kim, would you please introduce yourself and tell us a little about your company and your work?
Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. So my name is Kim Kirkendall, and I'm President of International Resource Development. I've been in and out of China and international business for over 30 years. So I do a lot of work with clients that are building factories in China, setting up sales operations, and have for, as I said, for a long time. I'm also a founding partner and the CFO for the Greater Cleveland Chinese Chamber of Commerce. And we're very active in the community with a variety of events through the year. So I'm looking forward to whatever I can add to this conversation about China's port development.
Thank you so much. Sorry, And our panelist, final panelist, John Cenice, if you could just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your work.
Thank you, Mary. Afternoon to everyone. Thanks again for having me today. As earlier, consulting firm, international, Ohio, also over there. And I've had some of the panelists actually today, with Mary, Will Friedman in particular, is the firm that I'm with now. Track together with the bar, it's under contract with the Port of Cleveland, to provide foreign trade zone services, which we hopefully will be talking. But international trade, which is the area which I focus on, usually is one that has impact, as we all know, in the activities of ports, of course, depends on that, but it also a lot of business in terms of since as a result of COVID, we have seen companies for sources in countries that they're very accustomed to. So challenges that I've had to assist companies with and serve on for to contribute in you. Mary, can you hear me?
About that. Thank
Mary?
you so much. Thank you to all of you. Some great work. And we know this is probably a year unlike no other for all of you and the work that you do. I don't see any questions yet in the chat, but we've got a couple questions that we wanted to ask the panel. And I would just say, if you want to contribute and you want to add something to it, just go ahead and unmute yourself and we'll dive right in. So the first question is, how has COVID affected your port and the flow of goods through it? And have you adapted to these challenging times? Maybe now and in the future. Oh. Anybody want to start with that one?
Well, I'll jump in. Well, yeah, understatement of the year. It's impacted everything. We're talking today on a day when we all learned that the American president and the first lady now have COVID. What next? Our business is down, like probably every port, nearly every port around the world. There may be a few circumstances where business may be up, but that would be an anomaly. Most of us have suffered a downturn in our regular trade. We see through our ports. We're no exception here. The mayor mentioned cruise in particular. We have a kind of burgeoning cruise business here at our port in Cleveland. The Great Lakes is being discovered by cruise lines, and there's a lot of growth forecast once we can get past COVID. But for this year, our cruise business was completely turned off, which was a great disappointment. We were finishing up a small passport control processing facility that we were hoping to inaugurate this year, and we'll have to wait for next year. Our regular steel trade, mostly coming out of Northwest Europe, is also down this year quite a bit. We won't know how much until we get to the end of the year. And domestic movements of raw materials like iron ore on the Great Lakes are also down. Our steel mill here in Cleveland shut down one of its blast furnaces. It's an ArcelorMittal mill at the moment, although it's been announced that it's being sold to Cleveland Cliffs, a Cleveland headquartered company that's expanding from iron ore mining into into steel making. So we are adapting. We've been, I think, quite effective in working with our partners. Our terminal operator, a company named Logistech based in Montreal, our labor force, the International Longshoremen's Association, and all the other partners in the supply chain have done a really remarkable job of putting in place the safety and health protocols and practices that have prevented anyone from, that I'm aware of, from getting COVID on our docks. So we're pleased that we have had that success, and we're hopeful that everybody can remain healthy. Should also mention we have moved forward quite aggressively with the capital program we have underway. We have a lot of important projects right now that are in the pipeline, either in a design phase or a construction phase. We're completely rebuilding our main gate into our port. Right now, we are undertaking some very important capital improvements at our bulk terminal, where we handle iron ore moving to the steel mill, and other projects that are critical. So we hope to emerge from this COVID period with a port that's more efficient than ever and ready to be more competitive than we ever have been. Just another quick word, and I'll stop talking so others can. We're a regional port. The markets we serve are mostly within Ohio and within our bordering states here in the Midwest, in the heartland of North America. So we trade domestically, primarily raw materials. We trade with Canada, and then we trade with mostly Northern and Western Europe, but on occasion other parts of the world through the St. Lawrence Seaway. We're a unique port in that we're well into the heartland of North America, able to directly serve many important interior markets, but we also have deep water here. We get, deep ocean shipping. Draft is limited, and dimensions of ships are limited by the dimensions of the locks, but nonetheless, these are still large ocean-going vessels that can come all the way into Cleveland and beyond in the Great Lakes.
Thank you, Will. Thank you so much. Anybody else want to answer that question in terms of how you're handling it?
Well, maybe if I can jump in as well. By us in Koper, it's really very similar as Mr. Friedman mentioned. Actually, in Koper, in our port, we are, let's say, lucky because, as I mentioned before, we are a universal port and we are handling all kinds of cargo, except crude oil and gas. All the other commodities we are offering services for. And it's interesting that certain cargo groups even increase in this pandemic, for example, fruits and vegetables in import direction from Israel, Turkey, Cyprus, Egypt, and so on. Import direction for Europe even increase. Just now we finished a season with grapes from Egypt for Europe, and it was a record year of import grapes from Egypt for different European countries. A very similar situation we found also 10 years ago with the crisis in 2009 and 2010. Certain groups decrease, certain groups of cargo even increase. And exactly this fact that we are a universal port or a multi-purpose port helped us a lot 10 years ago and also now, that we are going through this relatively well up to now. But of course, certain cargo groups suffered a lot. For example, cars, one of our terminals is car terminal. We are handling over 700,000 cars yearly, and we can face a decrease of about 10% this year concerning last year. Very similar is also with material for automotive industry. So iron products, metal products, alumina, different kinds of coils and so on. So yeah, materials for car industry, for automotive industry, this is also really decreasing a lot. And of course, cruise terminal, passenger ships are not traveling, are not coming to Koper at all this year. We can face also increase via, actually decrease from USA to Europe via our port. We are having from USA iron ore, different cereals like corn, maize, barley. This is also going down, so decreasing. But as William mentioned before, we are adapting to this situation. We introduced different protocols, of course, and we are hoping that this pandemic will go will over soon. And as I mentioned at the beginning, with this traveling was really funny this year. So we are staying in our offices. We are very often on the Zoom, Teams, and other platforms. We are trying to communicate with our business partners and our buyers all around the world. And as I mentioned, for this very moment is somehow going. This year will be the first year after many years without a record turnover. By the way, we are handling in Koper 24 million tons of total turnover, which is relatively well and good for North Adriatic, for South Europe. We are handling a little bit less than 1 million container units, so also very good number. And as I mentioned, this year without record, but still we are surviving and we are going through this these difficult times relatively well.
Thank you so much. Mayor, do you have anything to
Yes, maybe I can add if shortly. Is it possible? Okay, thank you so much. I would like to say a couple of words, maybe not too long, about the special state or special situation in Klaipeda, in the port of Lithuania. The state of emergency caused by COVID and 3 months quarantine applied in the country in the spring required an extraordinary cohesion of the entire Klaipeda city community. Although the state of emergency in Lithuania is managed at the state level, the implementation of the decisions adopted is entrusted to the local government. There is no doubt that the greatest burden was placed on the medical staff who worked with the COVID-19 patients. However, the municipality also had to make a significant contribution to organizing the work of the medical facilities, ensuring the diagnostic concerning suspected cases, providing medical staff with the protective equipment, transporting the infected persons, and providing facilities for self-isolation. The university hospital in Klaipeda, subordinated to the municipality, is the only one in the entire region to treat patients with the COVID-19. All countries have different subordination patterns and systems, which makes it difficult to make comparisons using some parameters. In Lithuania, the purpose of the treating patients with COVID in one hospital in a region is to make it easier for the other medical facilities to carry out the control of the infection, provide routine services, and reduce the risk of coronavirus infection in patients. To prevent the spread of the coronavirus in medical facilities, a mobile drive-in testing point has been set up and operates in the city for testing people with suspected COVID infection, as well as the fever clinics has been set up accept fever patients and carry out of their medical examinations. The aim is to minimize to the greatest possible extent the flow of COVID-infected patients in treatment facilities as long as they do not need hospital treatment. The services of our mobile drive-in testing point and fever clinic are provided not only to the citizens of Klaipeda, but also to the residents of neighboring municipalities. Ensuring the operations of all these facilities is the responsibility of the municipality. The Klaipeda municipality also ensures the disinfection of public transport, other facilities, as well as provided rooms for self-isolation for persons who do not have the possibilities to self-isolate at home. The uniqueness of Klaipeda as a port city, as I spoke before, compared to other places in the country, was distinguished by the fact that after the beginning of the quarantine, our city quite for a while remained the only gateway for the Lithuanian cities to return to the country. For some time, the land borders were closed, flight connections were cut off almost entirely, but seafarers were still operating, even if to a limited extent. Mobile teams, together with the public health specialists of the state-owned institution, were formed to meet the persons returning by the ferries to ensure their testing and, if necessary, transportation of such persons to the places for the self-isolation. As well, it's equally important to prevent the collapse of the economy and support business that have faced particular difficulties, especially those they have been forced to suspend their operations due to the quarantine measures in the country. Since the beginning of crisis, we have been actively looking for ways to mitigate the negative social and economic effects of the quarantine. Our goals are to help preserve jobs, the income of the population, and financial stability. Through joint effort, we have developed a Klaipeda City Economy Boost and COVID-19 Crisis Management Plan, providing for the measure necessary not solely for the prevention of the spread of coronavirus, but also of the viability of the economy. So I don't like to take too much time. I think if it will be interesting, I could share more bit experience about it because I have more statistics, many statistics, but I think it's much more interesting, the live conversation, live questions, live discussion. It's always live. And for me as a musician, for the jazz musicians, the live connection is much better, like prepared statements. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mayor. Great discussion. I'm glad to hear ports are busy. I know it's been a challenging year for everyone and across all industries. And so I give you all a lot of credit for trying to find creative ways of keeping things moving. For this next question, maybe we'll ask Kim and John and maybe talk a little bit about how specifically you work, the companies that you work with, how you engage the port and what some of these conversations look like to make the connections both in the US and internationally for the companies you're working with. So.
Sure.
I can start.
I'm going to give just a quick overview of what China's doing with their ports right now. Of course, China's been affected, like every country has, with the slowdown in supply chain, both supply and demand side. And so that's impacted the ports. But they've been expanding their ports domestically for many years. They have some of the largest ports in the world. And then in addition, what's been in the news a lot is about the Belt Road Initiative. China's in worldwide investment to recreate the Silk Road. So through the Belt Road Initiative, China's invested in ports in Kazakhstan, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Myanmar. There's a land bridge to the north, and then there's a sea routes to the south that they've been developing. In addition, China's out and out bought ports in Brazil and Abu Dhabi, Sri Lanka. And then through COSCO, which is a state-owned Chinese shipping company, they've also signed contracts to manage and run ports in just in Europe, in Italy, in Greece, Spain, France, Morocco, in a lot of different countries. So China has a tremendous amount of money invested in port development. So from a global geopolitical perspective, I would start with that. And then from a US company perspective, China, I always tell people China is more like Europe than the United States. So you have to think about each region as almost its own country. If you're coming into the Shanghai port or Ningbo, even Ningbo and Shanghai, which are relatively close to each other, can have very different of regulations into how things can import and export through their ports. So some companies may find that for their product categories, there's more restrictions in one port than another. So they may choose to import. Also, I would note that many companies in the US don't appreciate the geography of China. And so they may ship into the Shanghai port, which it would actually be much cheaper for them from a land transportation standpoint to ship into Ningbo, or go up to Qingdao. So, you need to think about it as shipping into Germany versus, the UK, because there's a lot of differences. And then lastly, China's government organizations tend to be very siloed. So if you have a problem with the shipment back and forth, I'm in the middle of a situation like this with a company that the SBDC, I'm contracting with the SBDC, consulting with some of their clients. And one of those situations is the company has a warranty claim. The US company has shipped probably $500,000 pieces of equipment to China that'll be incorporated in a larger product. And some of those pieces have damaged or defective finishing, which is going to affect how they're used in the machining. So it's a very complicated, more complicated than normal in terms of how do we send the replacement part in before the damaged goods are sent back, because of the product, we need to do it in that order. So what kind of documentation do we need? There are different bodies at customs that are involved in this. Are there any regulatory requirements? So I think just for the average business to understand that it's transportation and logistics is much more complicated than they anticipate. And as our port experts here will attest, there's a lot of different government agencies involved, different regulations that need to be followed. Different costs, that are incurred when you're shipping in and out of ports. So it's something I would definitely check with the experts to make sure that you're clear on what you're doing and how you're doing it.
Thank you, Kim.
John?
Sure, thank you.
John, do you want to add anything?
Our panelists have mentioned, yes, thank you. As panelists have mentioned, the result of shutdowns and a number of government actions that have companies to actually change. And that creates an issue because some companies bring in product countries where they have lower duties, and all of a sudden they may find themselves having to pay it, or perhaps they may not be familiar with them as well. As I mentioned earlier, my organization see tools in and attract date flow of goods through it. So the is currently working on is, and we're assisting with that, is the program, which for some of those may not be familiar with it, it enables to eliminate and in many cases defer the payment of duties when goods come into the port. At the port of so hopefully the ability to then have companies which are subject to duties and duties for the goods the port. This can be quite, and this we have a number of significant duties. So just looking at ports and the cost of handling, probably ought to look at even as a way of actually facilitating and reducing the that. So overall, through my practice, the pandemic has forced these companies to seek new.
John, I think you're freezing up a little there. No, we're not hearing you, John. Sorry.
Yes, I just finished, so please go ahead.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone. This has been some great discussion. Again, anyone who is participating in this session, if you'd like to ask any questions, please use the chat function. And then one of the questions that we have for the whole group is, given our importance of our sister cities, how can we look at ways to expand markets and work together for partnerships in the future to strengthen each of our ports and the activity that's within those? Not sure if anybody wants to take that first.
I'll jump in on that one. Yeah, I think we can use the sister cities relationships that are in place a little bit more effectively to identify and perhaps pursue some trading opportunities. You know, we would welcome that. I would welcome that. Certainly sharing information, learning more about our ports, our regional economies, and where there may be connection points would be worthwhile. On the other hand, as Mitya had mentioned concerning Koper and you know, his port in the Adriatic, sometimes geography is hard to overcome. And for us here in Cleveland, the sweet spot for us is trade with more with Western Europe. When you look at a map, you can immediately see why. It doesn't mean we can't necessarily have direct services between other parts of the world, but it's more likely for us, especially when you have to come through a series of locks and come inland with ships that you're going to be in closer proximity or more direct connection to us. We have a saying in the port world and in logistics that, you know, freight is like water. It will always follow the path of least resistance, and that's usually true. Although here in the Great Lakes and in the St. Lawrence Seaway, we're working very hard to eliminate resistance points, take any friction out of our system, which we haven't done all that well, I think, since the St. Lawrence Seaway opened in the late 1950s. And I think if we can do that, if we can model ourselves more on coastal short sea shipping and inland shipping in Europe and in other parts of the world, then it'll open up opportunities for us. Then ship owners, ship operators will take a more serious look at using the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Seaway routing for containers. One thing I didn't mention and should have is that we have the only container service in and out of the Great Lakes between Cleveland and primarily Antwerp, the port of Antwerp right now, called the Cleveland Europe Express. We started that service here in Cleveland. Our port started it 7 years ago, and it's still operating, still carrying containers on a regular basis between Europe and Cleveland. And we think that there's a lot of upside, and we can grow that business. We can serve more customers, and we're working hard to do that. So, in any event, in terms of more cooperation with our sister cities and sister ports, we would look forward to doing that in the near future.
Thanks, Will. Anybody else want to?
Yeah,
Sorry,
thank
I'm
you.
echoing again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Probably a couple of words. Thank you so much at first for the possibility to meet us from different parts of the world on the one panel session and the one screen. This COVID was like amazing possibility, still amazing possibility to know and to share and to explore how big possibilities we have to meet us online. Because before that, possibilities were like the same, but we didn't use for it. And now my big vision, my big suggestion is when we overcome and when we, how to say, will win against the COVID, to meet us not online only, but to meet us face to face. I think we missed for it very much, and I hope it will happen quite soon, probably next year. And of course, when we speak about the sister cities, we are very different, but at the same time we have very many similarities, and these similarities join us. Of course, it sounds very good, like sister cities and probably port brothers. So why not? But anyway, I think the cooperation is more than welcome. At first, we must change information about each of other, and probably we will find absolutely new information, absolutely new shadows of this information, which is not only interesting, but probably useful for all of us. So thank you once again for the possibilities to speak with you from Lithuania, from the Baltics, through the ocean to the Cleveland. And I'm still waiting. I began to wait for a meeting with my colleagues, with my friends in Cleveland as soon as it's possible.
Thank you. We welcome you anytime when it's safe to travel, for sure. Mr. Duke, do you have anything else to add to that?
Yes, thank you very much. Really, I fully agree what Mr. William and Vytautas mentioned. But as a proof, I would like to mention, I don't know if you, Mr. Mayor of Klaipeda, Mr. Vytautas, if you know that we are collaborating with your port, with Port of Klaipeda a lot. Actually, we are not working concerning cargo between both ports. But for example, the delegation of Port of Klaipeda visited us in Koper just a few months before COVID, so in the last months of last year. And actually, we are in touch, we are helping each other, we are exchanging the good cooperation, good examples between each other, and we are in touch also now during COVID situation. So this is already, let's say, really a proof of sister port and sister cities collaboration and helping each other. Otherwise, Kim mentioned before Chinese ship owner COSCO. COSCO is coming, of course, to Koper as well. This is really a huge container ship owner. But what we face in Koper, and we are having this also the challenge and issue for the future, is this, that because of this, as I mentioned on the very beginning, that we are a relatively small country, we are not known over the world. And where we are traveling around the world, we can face a lot of people and companies, also logistic companies, which they don't know where North Adriatic is, where Koper is. And when, for example, from Asia, they are having cargo for Europe, sometimes, or actually often, it's automatically, Europe, so Hamburg, so the biggest German port, or Europe, so Rotterdam, the biggest European port, the biggest Dutch port. But for example, from Asia to Europe, going via North Adriatic is 6 days shorter as going all around Portugal to North European ports. And this is also lower CO2 emission, lower transit time, as I mentioned, and of course also everything cheaper, faster, quicker. So from this respect, from this point of view, we can also help each other also in the segment of sister cities. Thank you.
Well, definitely we should connect, because I had a question 6 months ago from a Chinese contact who had some ports in the Shandong province that were looking to learn and collaborate with other ports. So we'll have a conversation.
This is the beauty of these kind of panels, Kim and John. I think you've got now some additional contacts for your clients.
Definitely.
Thank you. I don't see any questions in the chat. John, did you want to add something?
No, I think it's been covered by pretty much everyone. So thanks.
Okay, we only have a few minutes left. So again, and don't be shy of questions in the chat section if anybody has any. You know, Will, I think something you talked about with the containers and the Antwerp service in Cleveland, being that I'm here in Northeast Ohio. One thing we talk about with companies who are looking to ship and need port service, I mean, it's still kind of a secret that Cleveland Port is accepting containers. And I think the beauty, we joke about it, that the container can pull in and you say, hello, your container's here, come pick it up. And you don't have the East Coast and West Coast stacking at the port. And so I think for everyone, looking at nearshoring, reshoring, whatever opportunities may come in the post-COVID world, I think conversations like this are terrific to make the matches and make the connections in the industry so that we're all working together to, help each other. And again, with our companies who may not know, the first thing about it, I think John and Kim, you can obviously help shed a lot of light on these kind of services for our local companies. So with that, Colin, I don't see any questions. Do you have anything that's come in?
No, that's
Okay.
it for our end.
All right. Well, thank you, and good night to our folks that are not in the United States. Thank you again for giving up your evening to join us. I think this was a great discussion, and I hope everyone has enjoyed the conference. And thank you all again for your time and your conversation. I think this was a really valuable conversation, and here's to future partnerships and collaboration going forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Stay safe, everyone. Pleasure meeting you all.